This inside line is all about front bumpers for the Jeep Gladiator. I'm going to discuss approach angle, carrying a winch, and how to rotate the sway bar disconnect on your Rubicon for under $2. Now, I knew when I picked up this Gladiator that I would eventually get rid of this plastic front bumper. Maybe the most important reason why is it doesn't have a spot for a winch. Now, the other reason is I don't care for the full width. I like a stubbier front bumper as it really gives a lot of room for that front tire, so I can get not only a better approach angle, but I can get different sort of obstacle line choices, which is really going to help with this long wheelbase. Now, going for an aftermarket front bumper, of course, there are a ton of options from stubby, full width, steel, aluminum, you name it. Now, I had a few goals in mind when I started looking for a front bumper option. Weight was a big one. I did not want to add unnecessary weight to the front of this vehicle. I also wanted to be able to retain my fog lights, which is more important, I think, on this one because I do have the factory halogens. They are not as bright as the LED lighting group, so every little bit of lighting helps. I wanted good recovery points, so something that I could hook up to very quickly. And obviously it needed to be able to hold a winch, but for me, I did not want the winch to block the grill. Jeep did a very good job of giving a wide frame rail opening here so you can set a winch pretty far down inside, so that was important. So what did it end up doing? Well, I'll show you that in just a second. First, let me get this front bumper tore down, which I've shown you in the past is fairly simple. And if you haven't done it before, all you need to know is you'll need a flathead screwdriver to pop out the top plastic little insert here. Below there are 4 bolts for the skid plate, and then you have a total of 8 bolts that are actually holding on the front bumper. Before you can pull it off, of course, you'll need to disconnect the wiring harness that's on the passenger side frame rail. Now, Jeep did a great job of giving us plenty of room to drop a winch down in here, but I want to talk about something that's Rubicon specific just for a second. Now, my new bumper setup came with a winch tray, which means it's going to bolt here and inside of the factory frame horns. That's a great thing, have no problem with that. It's going to keep the winch out of the way of the grill, all good things. Now, one thing I was hoping that I could do that I've done on past Rubicons is actually rotate the smart bar here. Now, this is the electronic sway bar disconnect motor. And from the factory, it comes with a bolt that goes through this bushing that sits right here to the unit. Now, if you want to give yourself a little bit extra clearance, what you can do is actually unbolt that, rotate it up, you unbolt a bolt here, and going to your local Ace Hardware, you can get this M10. It's 100 millimeters long and it's a 1.5. Costs $2 for this bolt, and you can now bolt it up here and you got a lot more ground clearance. You don't have any issues. Now, the challenge with this, it depends on what bumper you have and if this is going to work. Now, my winch tray interferes just so much here, and I really just don't want to modify the winch tray and get into that whole deal for that little bit of clearance. It's neat. I've done it on the past. It has no effect negatively on the motor. It keeps this plastic plug out of harm's way a little bit better than when it's sitting down here in factory configuration. But just something to keep in mind. I'll be able to bolt the factory skid plate back on here, so that thing will be nice and protected and out of the way. If you have a Rubicon and you want to do something like this, just so you know, you can do it for $2 from your local hardware store. Now, I opted for a Trekker Series winch from Rugged Ridge. Now, this has a 12,500 pound capacity, which admittedly is a bit overkill for this Gladiator. In fact, typically what you want to do is figure out the weight of the vehicle and then multiply it by 1.5 to get where your sort of bottom line is for what you need for a winch. On something like this, that's around 5,000 pounds, you would need about a 7,500 pound winch at the bare minimum. Going with the 12,500, it wasn't that much heavier than the 10,000 pound winch I was looking at. It was about the same price given this thing was on sale, and I could opt for the lighter synthetic rope, which I really wanted, and this has a wireless controller. So a lot of things that led me to say, okay, let's go ahead and invest here. Now this has got a 2:16:1 gear ratio. It is a 3-stage planetary, IPF 68, weather rating, all that good stuff. It's one of those things where I'm not worried about this thing sitting out front. You do have to be mindful of the winch rope over time. Sun will definitely break it down, and obviously if you're in a mud a lot, you know, any type of abrasive that stays in there can break it down. So you have to put a little bit more work into taking care of it, but it's worth it. I've had really good luck with these over the years. They're just so much easier to handle and pull on the trail compared to steel, so that's why I opted for this. In terms of wiring it up, I pulled the factory air box because it makes it a lot easier to route the cables to the battery, and you know exactly where they're going, so they're not going to be hanging up on anything. So this is the Arcus front bumper, and it is very lightweight. It is 11 gauge stamped steel, and what you're looking at is probably one of the more OE looking front bumpers that are offered from the aftermarket. I like how this looks. I like the finish. I think it's going to give a good complement to the rear bumper, so I'm very happy with that. It being super lightweight means that I don't have to worry about adding a bunch of unnecessary weight to the front of the Jeep. And what they did was kind of smart. See, these cutouts here allow for these big, really massive hooks to go up front. It's a 1-inch thick hook, and it has a spot here if you want to run a conventional shackle, you can. But what I really like about it is if you're in a pinch and you need to get off, you're hanging off a cliff, someone can put a rope on this thing very quickly, and I guess I'm old school in that way, but I really like that. So this just bolts up to the factory horns. There's some nut plates to go on the back, and that's it. After that, I've got to take the stock wiring harness and the factory lights out of the original front bumper, bolt up the stock fog lights in the provided brackets, and then we can start wrapping up this whole install. Quick install tip: if you're doing this at home by yourself, go ahead and attach the shackle mount here to the fascia of the bumper with a set of zip ties. You just need to do it in this lower hole on each side. This will allow it to be a little easier when you go to install it, and you can use one hand to get the bolt threaded in and use these little nut plates to get it secured. It's a little awkward, but it's an easy way to do it if you're doing it by yourself. Now the last thing I did is went ahead and reinstalled my factory steel front skid plate. I think it finishes out the look very well, and I'm very happy with it. Now the way this wireless winch works is you'll hold down the remote for 5 seconds, and that's going to allow you to engage it to go in and out. Now to free spool it, you'll actually have to get out of the vehicle, come lift this lever up, and twist it around. Pretty simple, but it's not going to be completely hands-free according to this. Now this takes two 2032 batteries. Be sure you carry some extras just in case, and if you're really worried about it, you can always get an optional wired winch controller from Rugged Ridge that you can keep in the vehicle as well. While the new bumper and winch setup did add a little weight to the front of the Jeep, it's not enough that I feel I need to add a coil spacer to compensate for the additional weight. On road, you don't really notice much of a difference, though our aero probably took a little bit of a hit now that we don't have coverage blocking some of the wind in front of the tires. Ultimately, the Rugged Ridge Arcus winch bumper checked all of the right boxes for our needs. Not only do we have more room for our 35-inch tall Nitto Trail Grapplers, but by removing the full width bumper from in front of the tires, we have increased our approach angle significantly. The fact that we have the ability to run a shackle or simply toss on a recovery strap to one of the hooks is a great feature that makes this bumper a standout from many others. It's also worth mentioning that you will need to completely unspool your winch rope or cable and re-spool it with a load to ensure that it doesn't get damaged or tangled when you use it. Of course, we have some more upgrades for our Jeep Gladiator build, so please be sure to subscribe to our channel and stay up to date on all of our latest upgrades and adventures.